The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar midnight song as Marcus Williams pushed his mop across the polished floors of Technova Industries' executive wing. At 42, his hands were calloused from years of honest work, his shoulders slightly hunched, from the weight of responsibility that came with raising 2 kids alone. Most nights, after his janitorial shift ended at 6 a.m., he'd rush home to wake up his daughter, Emma, 12, and son, Tyler, 8, make them breakfast, and get them ready for school before catching a few hours of sleep himself. Nobody at Technova knew his story. To them, he was just the quiet janitor who smiled politely and never complained, invisible in the way people who clean up after others often are. But tonight was different. Tonight, Marcus would prove that brilliance doesn't wear a suit, and that sometimes the most extraordinary solutions come from the most unexpected places. It was 2:47 a.m. when Marcus noticed the lights still blazing in the main conference room. Through the glass walls, he could see CEO Rebecca Chen pacing frantically, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled, hair falling from its neat bun. Surrounding her were a dozen exhausted engineers, their faces illuminated by laptop screens, empty coffee cups forming, a small city of cardboard and desperation on the massive oak table. He'd seen this scene before, many times over the past 3 weeks, but never this intense. Marcus knew he should just clean around them and move on. That's what the job required. Stay invisible, do your work, don't interrupt. But something in Rebecca's expression stopped him, a kind of helpless frustration he recognized all too well. It was the same look he'd worn 3 years ago when his wife, Sarah, died suddenly from an aneurysm, leaving him alone with 2 grieving children and medical bills that still haunted him. That look of someone who'd tried everything and come up empty. He knocked gently on the glass door. "Excuse me, ma'am. I can come back later if you need more time." Rebecca barely glanced up. No, we're past time. We're past everything." Her voice cracked slightly. "Clean whatever you need to clean, friend. We're just trying to save this company before the sun comes up." Marcus nodded and began emptying trash cans, but he couldn't help overhearing the conversation that resumed behind him. "The algorithm just won't scale," a young engineer said, defeat heavy in his voice. "We've tried every optimization technique in the book. The data processing bottleneck for the medical imaging AI is insurmountable. We need to process 50 million patient scans in real time, but our current system crashes at 100,000. Without this working, we lose the 100 million hospital contract at 9M, and without that contract, we fold," Rebecca finished quietly. 600 people lose their jobs. All the cancer patients who could have benefited from early detection through our AI lose their chance. She slumped into a chair. "I've risked everything on this technology. My reputation, my investors' money, my team's futures. And we're failing because of a processing problem we can't solve." Marcus paused his cleaning. Processing problems. Bottlenecks. His mind drifted back to a different lifetime. Before Sarah got sick. Before janitorial work became his lifeline. Back when he'd been 3 semesters away from finishing his computer science degree at MIT, back when his professors had called him gifted, back when he'd published 2 papers on distributed computing that had generated modest buzz in academic circles. That was 15 years ago, in a world that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. He tried to focus on wiping down the windows, but fragments of the engineer's conversation kept pulling him back. Parallel processing limitations, data pipeline congestion, single-thread bottlenecks. The terms were old friends he'd abandoned, and they whispered solutions he couldn't quite silence. "Marcus, right?" Rebecca's voice startled him. She was standing beside him suddenly, her eyes rimmed red with fatigue and unshed tears. "You've been our night janitor for what, 2 years now?" "Almost 3, ma'am." "You do good work, consistent, reliable." She smiled sadly. "I wish I could say the same about our tech right now." She turned to leave, then paused. "Do you have kids, Marcus?" "2, a daughter and a son." "Then you understand why this matters. Our AI could catch cancers in scans that doctors miss, save thousands of lives annually. But if we can't solve this by morning," she trailed off, walking back to her team. Marcus stood frozen, his heart hammering. The solution was right there, crystallizing in his mind with the clarity of mathematical truth. He'd seen this exact problem in his graduate research, had literally published a paper, proposing a solution using distributed mesh networking with adaptive load balancing. It was unconventional, considered impractical by mainstream engineers at the time, but for this specific use case, with this specific bottleneck, his hand trembled on the mop handle. He should stay quiet. He was a janitor. Nobody wanted solutions from the guy who emptied their trash cans. He'd be embarrassed, probably fired for presumption. Emma and Tyler needed this job, needed the health insurance, meager as it was, needed the stability, but people were dying, and he knew he could help. Ma'am? His voice came out rougher than intended. I think I might see the problem. The room went completely silent. 12 pairs of exhausted eyes turned to stare at him. I'm sorry, one engineer said with barely concealed condescension. You think you see the problem with our medical imaging AI processing architecture? Marcus's throat went dry. I heard you mention the single-thread bottleneck in your data pipeline. Have you tried implementing a distributed mesh network with adaptive load balancing? Instead of processing sequentially or through standard parallel processing, you could create dynamic processing nodes that redistribute load in real time based on data complexity. The more complex scans automatically route to stronger processing clusters while simpler ones get handled by distributed microprocessors. The silence deepened. Then one of the senior engineers, an older man with silver hair, leaned forward. That's theoretical architecture from about 15 years ago. It was deemed too complex to implement practically. It was complex, Marcus agreed, his confidence growing. But that was before modern cloud infrastructure and containerization. With current tools, you could have a basic framework running in under 4 hours. I could sketch the architecture if you have a whiteboard? Rebecca stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Who are you? The whole story came tumbling out. MIT, the research papers, Sarah getting sick in his final year, dropping out to care for her and their newborn daughter, her death. The desperate scramble for any work that offered health insurance for his kids, the computer science degree that remained forever unfinished, gathering dust in a box in his small apartment. By the time he finished, Rebecca's eyes were glistening. Show us, she whispered. Please. What happened over the next 4 hours was something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. He stood at the whiteboard, marker flying across the smooth surface. Equations and architecture diagrams, blooming under his hand like flowers he'd forgotten he knew how to grow. The engineers pelted him with questions, skeptical at first, then increasingly excited. His solution was elegant, innovative, and shockingly implementable. By 6:30 a.m., they had a working prototype. By 7:45 a.m., they'd successfully processed 2 million test scans. By 8:30 a.m., they'd scaled to 50 million without a single crash. Marcus glanced at the clock, panic flooding through him. I have to go. My kids, they need to get to school. I need to... Sit down, Marcus. Rebecca's voice was gentle but firm. Please. At 9 a.m., when the hospital executives arrived for the demonstration, Marcus stood in the corner in his janitor's uniform, watching the team present the solution, his solution. The demonstration was flawless. The hospital representatives were stunned. The contract was signed on the spot, not for 100 million, but for 150 million, with expansion clauses that could double it. Then Rebecca did something that made Marcus's knees weak. Before we celebrate, she announced to the packed conference room, I need to introduce you to the person who actually saved this company. Marcus Williams, our night janitor. Over the next hour, she laid out a proposal that shattered every defense Marcus had built around his heart. Technova would pay for him to complete his degree, full tuition, full salary as a senior consultant while he studied. They were creating a new position for him, Chief Innovation Officer, with a starting salary that made his head spin, and in a gesture that broke him completely, they were establishing the Sarah Williams Memorial Scholarship for single parents pursuing STEM degrees. Marcus wept. In front of everyone, he simply wept. That afternoon, when he picked up Emma and Tyler from school still wearing his janitor's uniform but carrying an letter that would change their lives, Emma asked him why his eyes were red. Because sometimes, sweetheart, he said, pulling them both close. The world surprises you. Sometimes kindness wins. Sometimes people see you, really see you, even when you think you're invisible. 3 months later, Marcus started his new role. His first initiative? Creating a program to identify brilliant minds in unconventional places throughout the company, janitors, cafeteria workers, security guards, people whose potential had been overlooked because of where life had placed them. And every night before bed, he'd tell his kids the truth he'd learned, that your value isn't determined by your title, that brilliance lives in unexpected places, and that the measure of a company, like the measure of a person, is found in how it treats those who seem to have the least to offer. Technova's cancer-detecting AI went on to save thousands of lives. But the real revolution was quieter, more human. It was in the reminder that everyone has a story, that genius doesn't wear a uniform, and that sometimes the person who cleans your office can also change your world if only you're willing to see them.